This ship's explosion was no accident. I found the captain's journal describing what they fought. I have a book that shouldn't exist. It's a cheap, leather-bound logbook, the kind you can buy at any marine supply shop. The cover is warped from salt water, and the pages are brittle, smelling of diesel and a cold I can't quite describe. For 40 years, I've kept it hidden. 40 years ago, the sea coughed up a secret, and my father made me swear I'd never tell it. I'm breaking that promise now, because what happened on that ship is starting to happen on land. It was 1983. I was 17, working on my dad's salvage rig off the coast of Alaska. It wasn't a glorious job. It was rust, freezing spray, and the constant thrum of the engine in your bones. We were hauling up a busted trawler net when the world shook. It wasn't a sound so much as a feeling, a deep-chested thump that vibrated up through the hull and into my teeth. We all looked east. Against the bruised purple of the dawn sky, a flower of orange and black bloomed on the horizon, a pillar of smoke climbing into the clouds. It was miles away, but the scale of it was obscene. Dad just pointed, no orders needed. We cut the net loose and pushed the throttle full, chasing the smoke. It took us 2 hours to reach the chaos. Shipping containers, big as train cars, bobbed in the water like giant, colorful coffins. The air tasted like burnt fuel. And then we saw her. The Persephone, or what was left of her. She was a cargo ship, driven hard into the sheer face of an ice shelf. A titanic hole was blown out of her port side, right where the fuel tanks would be. The blast had shoved her sideways, embedding her deep into the ancient ice. She was groaning, the sound of a dying animal. There was no sign of life, no distress calls, nothing. Dad wanted to radio it in and leave, but I pushed. I was young and stupid. I thought about survivors. Getting aboard was a nightmare. We used the crane to lift 3 of us in an empty crab pot, a rusty cage swinging wildly in the wind. When it dropped onto the canted deck, the impact jarred my whole body. The silence up there was worse than the explosion. It was a dead, heavy silence. We found the first body near a winch, or part of him. His torso was there, but his arm was just gone. The stump was encased in this weird blue-white rime, like freezer burn, but it was growing. I could see tiny, sharp crystals branching out over his jacket. We found others, all the same, ripped apart, not by an explosion, but by something else. And on every piece of them, that same creeping, crystalline frost. I broke off from the others and made my way toward the bridge. The captain's quarters were just below. The door was jammed shut, warped in its frame. It took my dad and I throwing our full weight against it 3 times before it finally burst open with a shriek of tortured metal. He was inside. Thrown against the far bulkhead, his neck at an impossible angle. In his hands, clutched to his chest like a prayer book, was the journal. His name was Kalen Visser, captain of the Persephone. I took the book. I felt like a ghoul, a grave robber, but something told me I had to. Later, back on our own boat, huddled in the galley with a cup of scalding coffee, I read his last entries. What I read has haunted every single day of my life since. I've transcribed them here, word for word. December 4th. Stuck fast. Fog came out of nowhere, thick as wool. By the time we saw the ice, it was too late. Hit the shelf hard. Hull is breached below the waterline on the starboard side, but the ice itself is plugging the hole. We're not sinking, but we're not going anywhere. The impact crushed the lifeboat davits on that side. We're trapped. God help us. December 5th. First night was wrong. I was jolted awake by a sound, a deep, grinding thud from the deck above, like a wrecking ball had been gently placed on the steel. I lay in my bunk, listening. For an hour, I heard it. A weight so heavy it made the whole ship groan, moving in slow circles. Pacing. I thought maybe Ivar was on patrol, but even in his heavy boots, he's a ghost. This was something else. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The silence that followed was terrifying. December 6th. Woke to Ivar pounding on my door. His face was pale. Something got on board. The locks on 3 of the containers were sheared clean off. The heavy steel doors bent outward. contents strewn across the deck, covered in that same strange blue frost from the ice shelf. Ivar pointed to an indentation in the deck plating. It was 3 feet wide, pressed down a few inches, the steel around it warped. Leading away from it were footprints unlike anything I've ever seen. They weren't just impressions. The frost had grown out of the metal itself, etching the shape of a long, two-toed foot into the steel. "It didn't climb up here, Captain," Ivar said, his voice a rasp. "To do that, it would have had to jump." We went to the security room. The tapes from last night were mostly static, but around 0143 you could see it. A flicker. Something huge and pale rose over the ship's railing and landed with enough force to make the camera shake. A white blur moving in the darkness. It moved to the containers and tore the locks off like they were made of foil. Renzo, one of the deckhands, looked like he was going to be sick. "What the fuck is that?" Ivar was grim. "It's a scout. It'll be back, and we need to be ready to catch it." December 7th. We baited a container, leaving the door slightly ajar. Myself, Ivar, Renzo, and 2 others hid inside, armed with pry bars and wrenches. It felt insane. An hour after dark, we heard it. A scraping sound against the hull, then a deep thud as it landed on deck. We peeked through the gap. It was a nightmare. Like a primate, maybe, but stretched and wrong. 10 feet tall, covered in what looked like thick, white fur. Its skin, where you could see it on its face and hands, was the color of a deep bruise, a translucent blue. The head was long, like a baboon's, with no visible eyes I could see. Renzo, brave, stupid Renzo, decided to approach it. He stepped out of the container, hands up, speaking soft. He was 6'3" and looked like a child next to this thing. The creature turned its head. A shriek tore out of it, a sound that wasn't animal or human. It grabbed Renzo around the torso with one hand. Renzo's scream was the worst sound I have ever heard. "Don't touch it," Ivar yelled, holding me back. He pointed. Where the creature's blue fingers gripped Renzo's jacket, the blue frost was blooming. It crawled up his chest and neck, a crystalline cancer. Renzo went rigid, his screams turning into wet gurgles as the ice filled his lungs. The beast bit down on his shoulder, and the sound was like a tree branch snapping in the deep cold. A huge chunk of Renzo, frozen solid, came away in its mouth. Ivar shoved me. "Run, I have an idea." He sprinted away as the thing tore Renzo apart. It finished with the body, and its eyeless face turned toward our container. It started for us. Fear like I've never known. I couldn't move. Kael. "Get down." Ivar was back, standing on the upper deck with a flare gun. I dropped to the floor as he fired. The flare streaked over my head and hit the creature square in the face. It howled, a sound of pure agony. The burning magnesium melted its face into a running, glowing slag. It clawed at its head, and its own fingers dissolved from the heat. It staggered, then fell, dead. We dragged the body inside to the galley. We learned a few things. The fur wasn't fur. It was millions of tiny, razor-sharp icicles like spun glass. The blue skin wasn't skin. It was exposed, frozen tissue. It took 2 hours with a fire axe to hack off one of its arms, and the axe threw sparks with every hit. We put the severed arm in an oven. At 800 degrees, it didn't melt. It sublimated. Turned straight to a freezing, noxious gas that instantly cracked the oven's glass door. And then we learned the most important thing. They notice when one doesn't come back. As the sun rose, the lookout screamed. Another one was standing on the ice shelf looking at our ship. It was bigger. It walked to the edge, looked up at us, and let out a low, guttural hum that vibrated through the entire ship. It looked at the spot where its companion died, then back at us. It beat its chest and bellowed, a promise of violence. Then it turned and disappeared back over the ice. Ivar looked at me, his face a mask of stone. "We're dead, Kalen. All of us." December 8th. Ivar has a plan. He's been working all day with the crew, running hoses, siphoning fuel. I tried to ask him what he was doing, but he just shook his head. "You get the men ready to fight. I'll get the welcome mat ready." Night has fallen. The air is still. Too still. From my quarters, I can hear them. That low hum, not one this time, a dozen, maybe more. They're coming. I just went out on deck. Ivar and his team are waiting. They've poured gasoline all along the ice at the base of the ship. I can see at least 30 of them now, moving across the ice shelf. A silent white army. As they got close, Ivar screamed, "Now!" The crew threw torches. A wall of fire erupted 20 feet high, cutting them off. The creatures stopped, confused. One of them, curious, reached a hand into the flames. It pulled back a shrieking, melted stump. We were cheering. We actually cheered. Then we saw them start clawing at the ice, throwing chunks of it onto the fire. They were putting it out. Smarter than we thought. Ivar started firing flares into the crowd. One hit a beast in the back, melting a hole clean through it. But there were too many. One of them got a running start and leaped, clearing the wall of fire. It was about to land on the deck when Ivar shot it in the mouth with another flare. The force knocked it backward, right into the flames. It vaporized, but in doing so, it smothered a 10-foot section of the firewall. And they all saw it. Chaos. They started running for the gap. Men were screaming, running for cover. Ivar ran past me, his face black with soot. Engine room plan B. Get everyone to the engine room. I ran back here, to my cabin. I've barricaded the door. I can hear them on the ship now, multiple heavy thuds, the sound of tearing metal, the screams of my crew. I don't know what Ivar's plan is, but I can feel a deep vibration through the floor. It's coming from the engines. He isn't trying to save us. He's trying to make sure they don't get off this ice. He's going to. The entry ended there. A long, jagged pen stroke that ripped through the page. When we found the wreckage, we found a piece of one of them, blasted apart by the explosion. It was exactly as Kalen had described. The glassy fur melted into slag, the strange blue tissue exposed. One of the old guys on our crew, a nut who believed every conspiracy, said it was a government experiment gone wrong, that the ship was rigged to blow to hide the evidence. It was easier to believe that than the truth. So we all agreed. We reported the wreck, said there were no survivors, and never mentioned the body. I'm an old man now. My father is long dead. But I'm breaking my promise because things are changing. Last year, it was stories from northern towns about livestock found frozen solid in the middle of summer. 6 months ago, a group of hikers went missing in the mountains. They found their camp torn to shreds and strange blue frost growing on the trees. And last night, I woke up because my bedroom was cold, colder than it should be. I went to the window. On the outside of the glass, a handprint was etched into the frost. It was blue, and it had 2 long fingers.